This is the Tom Bigby Tales. I'm your host, Shannon Evans. I write about a small community in Northeast Mississippi called Columbus along the Tom Bigby River. And sometimes I write about the rest of the state. Today's episode is a continuation on the Lee family, but really it's about the legacy of Stephen D. Lee. When one mentions Stephen D. Lee, most Southerners think of him as the man who gave the actual order for the first shot fired at Fort Sumter. While Lee, a graduate of West Point, was a significant leader in the Confederate Army and a brilliant tactician, which he had proven in his time in the Indian Wars in Florida, this war was only 4 years of his life. And let's add a few more years of his time as a segregationist politician, and you still only have a tiny snapshot of his contributions to the state of Mississippi. Yes, we will explore some of the things that he did that were very much racist, but the man was a product of his time and lived in a time of great fear when the Black population in Lowndes County far outnumbered the white population. But perhaps Lee's greatest contribution to the state was his contributions to agriculture. When his wife Regina's grandfather and father died, Regina and her husband inherited Thomas Blewett's 270-acre Devereaux plantation, which lies in Noxubee County, just south of Lowndes County, along the Tom Bigby. They inherited this land after the Civil War. Lee would go on to add another 500 acres to the farm, trying to make it profitable. But he was also at this time working as a politician, where he fought for women's suffrage while suppressing any of the rights of Black men. While Lee appears to have moved to Columbus to live at Hickory Sticks soon after he failed as a plantation owner, he would then be found as Mississippi A&M University, now called Mississippi State, in Starkville, where it was founded in 1878 for white men of all classes. He became Mississippi A&M's first president, a position he held for 19 years. While his work there is monumental, he is most known as the father of industrial education in the South. Lee spent the latter years of his life rewriting Southern history and textbooks in support of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, glorifying the fine men of the Confederacy, the KKK, and downplaying the cruelty of slavery. He also worked with the Mississippi Historical Society and spent the last 20 years of his life honoring his fellow veterans and securing U.S. congressional approval for a national military park at Vicksburg and financial support for the veterans of the Civil War. While Stephen D. Lee remains a controversial figure, perhaps his greatest contributions were in his descendants. Lee was brilliant. There is no denying that. But his son, Blewett Harrison Lee, born after the Civil War, is considered even more brilliant than his father. Having graduated from Mississippi A&M at age 15, where he was the valedictorian of his class, and going on to the University of Virginia Law School to get his initial law degree, and then to Harvard for a doctoral degree in law, where he helped found Harvard Law Review before leaving to study abroad in Germany and then returning to the States to clerk for the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Gray. Blewett went on to be a senior attorney for the Illinois Central Railroad before founding a law school and writing seminal legal opinions still on the books related to aviation law and freedom of religion for non-traditional spiritual practices. Blewett's wife became a leading pioneer in forensic sciences, founding the first forensic medical program at Harvard and creating nutshell, miniature, highly detailed crime scenes that are still studied today. But it's their son that becomes even more interesting, and then later their grandson. Their son, who would be S.D. Lee's grandson, was an MIT grad with masters in both mechanical engineering and aeronautical engineering. He became the research director for the United Aircraft Corporation, later became known as United Technologies, where he was a primary designer of the Ford tri-motor plane. He would be the founder of the University of Hartford and and serve as the first chair for their board of regents. His wife, Hersey Maxim Lee, served as the president of the National League of Women Voters from 1950 to 1958, where she worked with several presidential administrations. They would then have a son, John Maxim Jack Lee, as well as several other children. But let's focus on Jack. Jack would have been Stephen D. Lee's great-grandson. He, too, attended MIT like his father, where he earned double degrees in economics and chemical engineering. He first went to work after university for DuPont in Wilmington, Delaware, developing a process to extract refractory metals from ore. He then went to work at the National Research Corporation, working on vacuum processes and equipment. He then went to work with Pratt & Whitney Aircraft, which is where he would spend over 30 years of his career. There he worked on development of alternative energy systems such as solar, wind, and thermal conversion units. Perhaps his most significant work was with the U.S. space program. In 1960, Pratt & Whitney were responsible for planning and developing the Apollo space mission's fuel cells that would put a man on the moon. Jack was tasked with developing, designing, manufacturing, and testing the fuel cells for the command and service modules for all the Apollo missions. He would later develop the fuel cells for the space shuttle. Jack died in 2020 at age 93. He is survived by 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren, and 4 great-grandchildren, all living in New England. It is interesting that Stephen D. Lee's son sold and donated the ancestral Lee home to the city and then made his own home in Chicago, where his wife's people were from, and then in Atlanta. Blewett's children made their lives in New England, primarily Connecticut, where the succeeding generations have all remained. I wonder if they are even aware of their southern roots in Mississippi and how education was recognized and made accessible to whites, specifically white males, by their ancestor Stephen D. Lee in Columbus, Mississippi. I wonder if they've even been back to Columbus to see where their great, great, and also great, great, great grandfather, Stephen D. Lee, lived for the bulk of his life with his wife, Regina Harrison Blewett Lee. Thank you for coming on my tour of Lowndes County and the Tombigbee River. This ends my series on the Lee family for now in Lowndes County. Until next time, when we talk about more interesting characters and histories of Columbus and the Tombigbee River.